supply chain has been one of the critical factors that has been deliberated and discussed in the industry at this juncture, given the significant linkages to the value chain around the world. And we have some of the best voices catering to different parts of the value chain again. So we'll hope to bring in views and give us some insight into where we are headed in the future. I'll come to Mr. Doraswamy first. As Continental, you've been part of the recent challenge that the industry faces with regards to rare earth. Well, there's a lot more beyond rare earth as well from a supply chain perspective. But a lot of effort has gone into securing licenses and even focusing on localization. How self-reliant are we at this juncture, given the dependency that we have? And what's the right path for India in your assessment? How can we circumvent this challenge, even as the linkages are likely to remain for years to come?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. Maybe before I answer this question, I'd like to give a little bit of background what's happening in the transformation within the automotive. And we've seen this for the last 6 years. It started sometime in 2018, 19, before COVID, and COVID further aggravated us. And if you see cars, I've been seeing, purely it used to be mechanical. Slowly we started adding electronics to that. With that, electronics came in software. And now we are talking about software-defined vehicles, and that's causing a lot of complexities in terms of the value chain resilience. Yeah? And also, if you talk about the challenges, last 5 years we've been chasing acronyms called CASE or ACES, whatever it is. I would like to add one to that, P. I think the world has really become polarized.
Absolutely.
And I call it as a PACE, polarized, automated, connected, and electrified. And so with this, a lot of challenges, and the recent one, what we saw is certainly the rare earth metals. And today, the dependency on electronics in a car is huge.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, while the productions are a little bit of regionalized, and while the market was globalized, and markets also moving from globalization to regionalization, which is also causing these heartburns, and business is being used as a political commodity. And you saw what happened with rare earth metals. And the recent example is Nexperia. It's nothing to do with technology. It's a political battle between two countries, which is causing huge stress in the value chain ecosystem. Honestly, do we have an answers? Absolutely no. And we will have some more like this in the coming decade. I think only we can answer this by being more agile and how fast you respond to the situations, and also how fast you build up your value chain resilience. For example, semiconductor crisis, post-COVID, we had coming. Still, we don't have really a solution, but as an intermediary, what each one of us doing is we're blocking the capacities 2 years, 3 years in advance, based on the commitments what we get from customers. And the number 2 is also having inventories for critical items up to 6 months. So this comes with a cost, but that's the business we have to value, stopping versus how much we can do in terms of not able to, in the position of not able to predict what future go lies is. So this is going to be a challenge. I see next 1 decade, certainly this is going to be a huge challenge as we move from globalization to regionalization. What India could do, certainly, as it's moving towards the regionalization, and that's based on the individual specific market demands, specific consumer demands, and also the different regulations, how much we can build our own ecosystem, to what extent, at what cost, is the question I think still we are grappling with. And slowly we are coming there. For example, semiconductor industry. We never had this ecosystem 5 years back, but now at least we see from next year onwards, there are 3 or 4 players who are going to. Will it solve the problem? Honestly, no. Yeah. But at least somewhere we have started this journey. It could take another 8 years to 1 decade for us to an extent possible, self-reliant. But these are different steps, both jointly from the companies, from the corporates as well as from the governments, which are trying to see how do we remain resilient to all these factors.
Absolutely. I think spending on R&D, creating your own solutions, looking at localized alternatives, looking at alternate basis, that's the way. From rare earth, if I could bring in Rishabh from a BASF side, there's another element there of lithium, and there's always this question mark with regards to what kind of chemistries for EV. There's a lot of talk about cathode, anode, graphite. How secure is India? You are a material company. In your assessment, how strong are we when it comes to the local value chain, and what are the challenges that we may face if we don't localize at pace?
Yeah, thank you first of all for bringing us here. I think I come from a partially separate domain of the chemicals. But yeah, I think on the cathode, anode, in fact, the several component side, we have seen a lot of localization activities already happening. If you look at the primary chemistries that are going into the EVs right now, it's LFP in the cells. And we are seeing the cathode announcements already happening from multiple players. Also on the graphite side, it's a bit of a challenge to put in to have the synthetic graphite, but we have seen a player putting in, an investment in the R&D, but they decided to do it first in US and then in India, although being an Indian company. But that's how you differently see how the speed of the markets are. The remaining, I think the electrolyte side, we have also seen some investments coming in from the Indian companies itself for localization. So in and all, there has been a lot of efforts from Indian companies as well as multinationals to put in local capacities. I would say in case we do not localize it immediately, to the second part of your question, how secured we are, I think at the moment what has happened with the pace that has been there, and since morning, I think the pertinent question has been on how much of penetration till 2030. I think it's a fascination with 2030. I think the number is quite appealing to us. And that's why you see that there's a lot of requirement on the pace side now. The speed has to be pertinent. And that's why we are asking this question again and again. But otherwise, if you look at the reliability part, what people has done is they have gone, due to that speed requirement, particularly into one geography, which was cost efficient, producing at scale, and also had in-house R&D. Do we have alternates? Yes, do we have alternates? We can go to Europe for some key requirements of the raw materials. We can go to Japan, Korea, etc. So these countries are also available as alternates. Do you have economies of scale? To a certain extent, yes. And do you also have the R&D available there locally? Yes. So the only question comes to the cost. So I think being a very price-sensitive market, what we have done is we have chosen so as we say in India, we take the most juice out of the lemon here. I think that's what we have done. But do we have other lemons available in the market? Certainly we do. So are we secured from a perspective? I'll say yes. Only caveat in that is the qualification timelines. If you look at any raw material which goes into these lithium-ion cells, the qualification timelines are easily running a minimum of about 1 year to a maximum of about 2.5 years. So if I have to do it right now, I'm easily looking at an average of 18 months down the line when I have something which can go to an OEM for homologation. And if I'm doing that, then OEM doing that homologation, it will again take a year or so, qualifying the battery pack and then doing all of it. So the only thing that we have to be very cautious about, and do we have really that time available in case there is a stoppage. Otherwise, I think we have other geographies, other companies providing similar or even better raw materials. So from that perspective, I think we can be pretty sure.
So there are some capabilities emerging here locally, and there is a need to diversify. It's just that the cost that we pay and the pace is something that needs to be looked at. Ashim, if I could bring you in, you track the sector very closely. You understand the regions around us. Clearly, the import content on electric vehicles is pretty sizable. What are low-hanging fruits? Where do you see the opportunity? The PLI for cells did not really take off. There is fear of China imposing controls there. We still don't have heavy rare earth locally. You've sized up several markets, including India. How do you see what is the right path in your assessment where the ecosystem could evolve their game plan for future?
So yeah, thanks, Ketan. I think the multiple nuances to that. There are certain things where we can do it. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of scale. For example, electronics. I think we have so many electronics players on the panel. They'll talk about that. So that's something that's certainly doable. There are some areas where we don't have the raw material. For example, lithium or rare earths. Right there, we need to look at what we can do, which means talk about say formulating the chemistry. So at least having those recipe makers here. Rishabh mentioned a timeline. I would say, if you are starting from scratch on something like that, it could even take 5 to 6 years, from doing something to putting that into the battery, into a vehicle in the form of a battery pack. And so if you have that 5 to 6 year timeline for that, you need to start now if you want to do something in the future. I think we heard earlier in one of the panels also, otherwise we'll always be technology followers, right?
Right.
I think the bedrock for all of that will be R&D. Right. Just to give you a perspective, BYD, which people talk about as being very innovative in the EV space and all, they employ more than 100,000 people just in R&D. Right? If you look at what we are doing here, we don't have that kind of scale. And it's not just the industry players. It's also at the curriculum level. We don't have it. I mean, it's a well-known fact, right? I don't think we need to shy away from that. Doing masters in India vis-a-vis going overseas and doing masters, you have a much brighter future there. I think that'll have to change because unless we do this R&D here, we're not going to be able to do anything with regard to chemistries, cells, and things like that. Similar is then with the rare earths. Again, we found some rare earths, which are not heavy rare earths, but we don't have the processing capabilities for that. Now, building the processing capabilities, then getting somebody to make magnets out of it, it's again a long gestation period. So similar path will be followed there as well. And finally, also in terms of capital equipment, whether it's for processing rare earths, even recycling rare earths, or even for making cells, we are seeing curves being imposed on that. The capital goods sector anywhere in India needs to take off much more than it has, and therefore, even in this regard, we'll have to again go back to doing the research, working it out. It could also be technology alliances. So, I don't say we need to recreate the wheel in all of those cases, but again, we'll need to have the core talent within the country, and that sort of is going to be one strong foundation we'll have to build on when we look towards the future.
So like Mr. Duraswamy and how Rishabh mentioned, it is going to be a long haul, and it starts with developing R&D, and that's an avenue which lets a lot to be rude. So it's a challenge. So I think significant amount of R&D investment is needed. Prashant, if I could bring you in, you're a global player. There is that strong emphasis from your customers to look at localization, and with the challenges that are there around, how do you circumvent them? At the end of the day, your consumer OEM wants the product as cheap, as cost-effective as possible, and as fast as possible. What has been Yazaki's journey so far on that front?
So just as a quick introduction, we are a big player in the electrification side, yes, be it EVs or hybrids or any other technology. I think the easier side of the problem is to localize, to build, reduce cost. I think that is something which we, and I think many of the other tier 1 players are also definitely doing. And do that in terms of deep localization, coming in from developing the product to then testing it, validating it, tooling it, and then eventually, of course, manufacturing it. For example, in our case, we took the first action of sending our engineers abroad for 2 to 3 years of training in Yazaki's global facilities, so that when we had an Indian OEM asking us for a product development, we could develop the product in India.
Right.
I think this is a bridge which we all know how to do. It's only the nature of the product has changed. As Ashim rightly said, and as Prashant also mentioned earlier, the food cuisine has changed. It is more right, electronics and so on and so forth. But I think the deeper question which we have to address as a society, government, and all of us as players, what the might and strength of China that we see probably started 2001 when their, I forget which 5-year plan it was. We are today saying that the news is that the 5-year plan from today till 2030 doesn't have EVs as one of the focus areas.
Right.
It probably today has biotech and many other things.
Right.
So it has taken them 24, 25 years to create what they have done. And as Ashim rightly said, today much of the incentives and even what we talked about in the morning session, some of them are very nice government enablers. We are all talking about subsidizing demand.
Right.
Mr. Gulati referred to certain TRLs. I was wanting to get some time with him, but I couldn't. He said only one of the 4 TRLs, I don't know what TRL stands for, but I'm assuming it is Technical Research Laboratories.
Yes, yes.
Only one of them has taken off, the other 3
Haven't taken off.
haven't taken off. But I think we have some recipes. No? For example, I was fortunate to see Prashant's 14-story, 12-story technical center. GCCs have created raw material in India, human talent, right? Can we develop them? Can we incentivize global tier 1s to actually bring in more material, forward-looking research development in India? Government has a DLI scheme. But frankly speaking, today we talked about PLIs in the morning meeting. I think Mr. Qureshi also said 10 people have got DVA certificates. But there's no discussion on how many people got DVAs, I don't know whatever is the equivalent, for the DLI scheme.
Right.
Because that's more deeper, right?
Yeah,
it is higher value, but much more future in the time. I think all of us as tier 1s, especially for us as Yazaki, my biggest role is to convince Yazaki to do fundamental R&D in India, right? That I think is what should be our genuine contribution. The rest of it will get forced. The OEM will make sure that we localize. For us to win business, be competitive and make money, we will localize.
Right.
But what I think we should really be judged on, what we must push ourselves on, is to do what Ashim talked about, right? Today, everybody wants to do AI, right? Everybody wants to do a new startup to deliver shaving cream 10 minutes faster. But I think aerospace and space, I think now you are a lot of startups coming in. I am hoping that they will catalyze more fundamental material science, technology-oriented products, which can make us self-reliant 3, 5, 10 years down the line. From then till now, there is no other option other than to make, some compromises on the global discussions and then do the best that you can to manage the transition.
Yeah, the PDCA, plan, do, check action of the Japanese. Keep at it and find a way eventually when
with a certain sense of reality. You know, PDCA with the desire to do something is okay.
Yeah.
But PDCA knowing fully well what got you here.
Right.
I think that is key.
Right. Mr. Marwa, if I could bring you in as an Indian OEM, at the end of the day, India is very well clued into the global value chain. The likes of Continental and Yazaki have global roots. But for an Indian company, how challenging does it get when your consumer, the OEM, demands you to deliver things quickly? And how do you manage that? Is partnering Chinese companies a way? Is technical licensing a way of getting into the value chain and bring in solutions that are homebred?
So as a Indian auto tier 1 component supplier, it's very intimidating to see Prashant on your left and Prashant on your right. You know, my good friends in the industry. For us, the challenge even becomes higher. The reason being, one, we don't have a global scale as a standalone Indian tier 1. But fortunately, I think as far as the Lumax Auto Technology DNA goes, which I represent, we have still managed to scale up our revenues by 5x in the last 5 years.
Oh, that's wow. Fantastic.
That's been a mix of 2 things. Number one, aggressive M&A strategy, including acquisition. Second, focusing on premiumization and electronification journey. We were one of the auto component champions in the PLI scheme, right? I gave up the pursuit 2 years back. I would have had to park hundreds and crores of rupees, committing investments, which I don't know would have seen the light of the day in terms of the demand actually fructifying.
Right.
Second, the raw material scarcity crisis became more and more real. So we came back on the drawing board like other Indian tier 1s, the major tier 1s. We decided to be powertrain agnostic. Yes, to answer the investors, and I just finished an earning call on Saturday also, the familiar question again coming back, what's going to be your BEV component contribution? We changed the narrative to clean mobility.
Right.
And that, of course, includes the alternate fuels also, including a CNG company acquisition that we have done. For us, more than the components where we are not playing, and I'm not shy of admitting it, we are not in motors, we are not in controllers, we are not in battery packs, we are not in BMS, We're not in wiring harness. I can't even dare to come with Prashant here, right? Sumitomo there. What we are focusing very strongly is the semiconductor resilience and assurance of supplies of semiconductors. And trust me, that is where the pain actually lies.
Yeah, electronics.
The government, in spite of all its great intent, and full marks to them in terms of, making the right narrative, the right noise about it, you declare OBD2 norm, 2020. Middle of lockdown, I become CEO. And middle of lockdown, the OBD1 rolls out, 1st April 20. We meet that timeline with whatever we are supplying. Phase 2 gets implemented 1st April recently in 25.
Yeah.
Now, in between this, on the emission side, we have got a component, where the heart of that component, using a material like zirconium dioxide, and my friend from BASF would know that, it mimics as a semiconductor at high temperatures.
Right.
It's a ceramic.
Right.
It's a ceramic. More so when it is giving a lambda signal. At that time, it turns into a full-blown semiconductor.
Right.
Now, this is a precious metal that I am fighting for right now. More than the, uranium and acarium and all these elements, I am fighting for that particular element. Now, this semiconductor is also not the ceramic, but the other real semiconductors are going into my transmission systems, they are going into my switch mechanisms, they are going into my display systems and everything. So the only way I can do it is, I do not have access into China. I did not have till now. We just rolled out our first China office in Shanghai. It's still taking baby steps there on various fronts, including raw material sourcing, making technical alliances with Chinese partners. And India being a strange cocktail of an automotive economy that is characterized by 3 clusters: the Japanese cluster, the Korean cluster, and then the Indian OEM cluster. When it is itself not able to find its right DNA, we decided to lean on the biggest one, which is the Japanese cluster. And fortunately, I have half of my JV partnerships running with the Japanese companies. So in terms of the RASIC, as you say, we very clearly shifted the responsibility of the semiconductor sourcing and this insulation from the rare earth crisis onto our Japanese JV partners. To that extent, we have forged up plans till 2030 with them, signed off on everything. They are fighting those battles. I am not.
Fantastic. So till the time you don't have capabilities, you need able partners. Either have a base in China or have a partner who has the capability or has very well-linked supply chain. Mr. Chawla, if I could bring you in, a lubricant company wanting to make it big in the electrification space, chose the right thing, acquired several companies. How can Gulf Charge or Gulf Oil contribute to the localization mandate of the government of India?
Yeah, we made our move into EV mobility and started with chargers and also software as a service in charging. So I think for us, Tyrex, which is our DC charger company, and we have a UK-based company called Indra, which we have globally. So you have AC and DC chargers. Talking about Tyrex in India, I think the team is working on looking at strengthening the R&D. It's they got components and put it together. Now we're looking at engineering, going into those components, trying to localize as a policy side. We're also looking at a lot of our testing capability to make sure that chargers work. And we've got heavy duty use with bus OEMs and other things. So we bringing that capability and really strengthening it. India is, as you know, as we have to custom fit, there's servicing of the chargers. Uptime is very important. So I think we are doing a lot of R&D in that form. Localization is happening, but we know some components do come from out, but we are trying to see the capability. For example, PCBs, we are trying to ingenize. We want to make it here, backward. We want to look at our design. The weather here is different. Yeah. People want modular chargers. So how do you design chargers better? How do you make sure that different, now we've got AC chargers we're supplying to 2 OEMs. Some of them are here today. And then we are looking at how to localize. So really localization is an agenda. The PMP program has made us do close to 55%, starting with the cabinets outside, the wires, the harnesses. Now we are going further into the other components. So I think it's a journey, and we definitely want to take the R&D, take the design, take the localization. And of course, digital part is coming with the software. So people, our Electrify platform is providing a platform for people to see where you can charge. It's how the charger will talk to the OEM,
Right.
how you're putting other platforms which consumers need. So I think that's the journey, and I think that's really where we are finding a lot of great innovation, which is also our DNA as in lubricants. We go into a segment, so that's really where, and we have a strong brand in Gulf. So, we want to leverage all that, which is a trustworthy brand with more than 45 OEMs. So really bringing it all together and trying to localize.
Is 100% localization realistic in your opinion, or are we going to be part of the global value chain and we have to make do with the complexities that emerge along with it?
See, if you make the components, we can make it here, but the delta of the cost which you get from other places will just not enable you to get it at the cost-effective rate. So I think that's really the challenge.
So what's the path then you will take, given the fact that is there a localization target or
Yeah, so it's about 55% now. That's what the team tells me. But I think we want to go further. We want to look at it. And of course, as the scale picks up, like for example, AC chargers, there's a PCB which you can make here. So things like that is on the anvil.
Right. If I could bring in Pedro, there's a lot of talk about materials at this juncture, and people are looking at alternatives. If you're talking EV, one cannot forget the net zero part of it, the recyclability part of it. Tell me from Radici's perspective, what are the alternatives available to address the complicated geopolitical situation wherein a region, we're moving towards regionalization, a region can cater to the needs of the market, and you've done a lot of work on the plastic front as well.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. Well, as you may have noticed, I am not Indian, so I hope you can forgive me if I am not that much into Indian-specific perspective of how this problem is. It's also true, nevertheless, that this is indeed the local way it is perceived a global situation that we are all used to since, at least since after the COVID. So the tension of the supply chains, the continuous, the situation where we have key resources that are somehow at limited access, and we have somehow to react. In our specific sector, actually, we do plastic materials, engineering polymers, polyamide, and PBT. Also before the COVID, we had sometimes to deal with shortages due to chemical value chain tensions and so on. So it's something we are very used to, and we somehow had to learn to deal with. How can we react and how can we operate? In my opinion, there are two main topics that can answer these instances. The first is flexibility. The flexibility is a big is a mindset that helps you view different solutions, different alternatives where for some reason, for any reason, you can't pursue the standard one, the direct one. And the second, which is linked to the first, is the local capability to react to local instances. We are a global company. We are a global multinational based in Italy, but we have local production and compounding facilities in all the key macro areas, including India, starting in 2022, where we actually built, and after acquiring a local compounder, we built the plant in Alol, in the Gujarat state. And our presence is not merely a production presence, but it also involves a local team of sales, marketing and development, technical service, research and development. This is all in the perspective of being able to collect local instances and local problems, understanding them the way only local people and personnel can do it, but being able to react with the strength and with the resources of a global company behind. That's what in our company profile we call to be global and local at the same time. And You mentioned the recycling. That's also one topic where we have been working a lot in the latest years. Actually, on a global level, we have been exploiting our more than multi-decades experience in mechanical recycling of engineering polymers. We have created a brand that is Renycle that is supporting this kind of demand from the market, that on the one hand is the answer to request of decarbonization, and on the other hand is able to respond to local technical requirements in a proper way, even by developing tailor-made and specific products whenever needed.
So you've got to be open to different possibilities, different materials is what you are saying, and you've got to be local in your mindset.
Exactly.
You've got to have that global view, but at the same time adapt to the local needs in the market. If I could move to electronification, as Mr. Marwa mentioned, has been the buzzword, and semiconductors have come to light. You probably connected to millions of vehicles on Indian road with your number plates. I mean, how can electrification, or for that matter, the electronification, lends itself to further opportunities?
So I think we all know how connectivity, how synonymous it is with all electric vehicles today. But we don't understand the complexity when it comes to M2M connectivity with the 2.5 telcos remaining in our country, as well as globally, because it's a very regulatory heavy industry. And along with M2M connectivity is very different than consumer. How we know it for our cell phones is very different, right? So we've been at the forefront of that, giving telco agnostic platforms on all different kinds of eSIMs and embedded SIMs, as well as other form factors, which enable all kinds of electric vehicles to use data on any kind of device that they're using, whether it be an EV can or otherwise, to use it for tracking the state of charge or FADA and so on, right? Now here, if you see, even on the hardware side, we all started with the Chinese supply chain gradually. Then we went to the European supply chain, and now finally we are indigenizing some of the supply chain, and that has happened gradually. How is the government has taken the right steps in the way that it actually chose the industries to protect from the neighboring countries of the Chinese, such as the telecom connectivity, the automotive manufacturing, and so on. And it went a step further to even incentivize use cases or the EV industry or the electronic manufacturing industry to gain a certain amount of scale, right? So we attained the scale at this point, and now they're incentivizing the component ecosystem, and we see the fabs coming in the future. Yeah. So we, taking cue from that, we already took a step further and invested in putting up the manufacturing for the hardware itself here. Right. And it is globally accredited, and we're able to actually enable connectivity for vehicles, devices, OEMs that are exporting to all over the world, right? So what they get is regulatory, very easy, an Indian entity to an Indian entity relationship, where they're able to really control, have control over their connectivity for wherever they send it, whether it be Africa, Europe, South America, Nepal, Sri Lanka, whatever it may be, right? So I think just aligning with also the right steps in the government and seeing the future, I think we've been able to do our best from our perspective in indigenizing the EV.
How localized are you at this juncture?
So all the hardware is in-house. Obviously the modules, like I said, we have different European partners. Hoping to, over the next couple of years, once the fab comes online, fabs in India come online, to get from them. But I think that also is a little further out, because they're going for the high-end modules first and on the way down. But more to that, we also see an opportunity in, for example, the IoT modules. There are hardly any Indian players, right? So that is something that is of interest to see how to localize as well.
Right, right. Significant opportunity is there. Mr. Doraiswamy, if I could bring you in. Intricacies of the global supply chain are a given, and like you mentioned, it's going to be a decade before we actually find a solution. But we have a market which is growing. We have consumers who are wanting more electric vehicles. We have players who are going to be bringing in more cars, which will create more demand. How do you navigate the short, mid, long term from the supply chain? What is the right mix of localization? And plus, add to that, maybe, there's a lot of demand, especially when you export from India, is also this aspect of net zero. That also comes in. So when you look at the supply chain, maybe it's an intricate supply chain. So, I mean, what's a short, mid, long to the current crisis potentially that the industry faces?
Why are we talking about so much about electrification? The reason is this is revolutionary in nature, and it is forced on us. It's not a consumer demand. It's forced on us by governments and regulations. That's why we see a lot of challenges in uptake of this. Whereas you talk about connected or autonomous, it's a consumer-driven preference, and you see the uptake there. That's number one. Number two, if you look at the automotive industry, there are three values. One, we started with speed, then moved to safety. With that came in autonomous driving. The other value is moving from ICE to electrification. And the third is from single ownership to a third room, which led to shared mobility.
Right.
So some of the smart OEMs have coupled this and made themselves very successful. For example, Tesla, BYD. It's difficult to really call them purely electric vehicles. They combined electrification with connected and autonomous, or Waymo addressed shared mobility with autonomous. So they address these two value systems in a different way, and that's how they've been very, very successful.
Right.
Third is, when you talk about electrification, 30% is pure electric technologies. Another 70% is the other rest of electronics.
Electronics, yes.
So it's just concentrating only on the electric powertrain is not going to really solve our problem. So that 70% is also today very well ingrained with. Fourth, I think if you see the size of market in 2021, the total automotive was 2.8 trillion. And it's projected to grow to 5.4 trillion. Originally it was 2030, now it's moved to about 2034, 35. So almost double. All this growth is coming from majority software and software as a service.
Right.
So India have taken a lead, especially in IT. I think today the content of software in an electric vehicle, you don't see that.
Right.
It's huge, nearly about by cost, if you see, it's hidden inside the material cost as an amortization or whatever you call, that's nearly 20 to 25%. I think that's the easiest one for India, having led the revolution in the IT. I think that's where certainly we could look at localizing the R&D first. I think we gain a lot.
Localizing R&D and software first.
Absolutely, absolutely. It has a lot of value inside the car. Can really India take the lead for the world? Yeah. So today morning also looked at today the complexity in a car is about 200 million plus lines of code. But we don't want to just be measured by number of lines of code you measure, but we want to really go up to the value chain. That's where can we really come out with an operating system which drives the entire car. That's the core cost of the car. Then the peripherals, top layer, bottom layer, always you can get it from anywhere. So this is the differentiator. So first, can we really focus on localizing the R&D? I think we have the capability, we have the strength. And the second is, we should not be localizing just for the sake of localization. I think it has to make two sense. Either is it giving a resilience in terms of the supply chain so that you are not impacted because of the regionalization? And the second is it giving a cost competitiveness?
Right.
I think that if there is a business case in this, then certainly we should go ahead and localize. And the third is, to some extent, if you are able to really predict the technology, maybe sometimes it's better to suffer for a shorter time for a better longer time. Can we invest in those technologies?
Right. So the core answer is let's start with the roots, let's start with the R&D, and eventually solutions will emerge. And in the meanwhile, let's try and be agile and deal with the complexities as situation turns. Rishabh, if I could bring you in, what are 2 or 3 key steps you think India would have to take in terms of self-reliance? Because majority of the material, especially on the electrification front, we are relying on the outside world. So you think the trick lies in localization or rather R&D effort on chemicals, R&D effort on looking at different alternatives? Because like Prashant mentioned, Mr. Duraswamy, as to how it is going to be a decade-long journey. So how do we deal with the cyclicalities that we deal with on a short, mid, long-term basis? So what are the 2, 3 key things needed on the self-reliance part?
So what I'll do is I'll get to the chemical-specific section, because I think you've heard the veterans of the industry, so no point in me adding to that. But if you look from a chemical supply chain perspective, in terms of self-reliance, I think government, first, they have to do their bit. If I start with the EV space here, and then if I talk about the raw material reliance, the government is already making their pacts with countries like Australia and somewhere in South Africa. They're trying to secure the supply, the manufacturers, in terms of having the raw material supply from alternate sources in case there is a particular tension with the geographies. So that's one. Second, I think, which everybody touched upon since the morning, and I can see it across the value chain, is investment in R&D. The bigger challenge that we have is that we do not have an in-house technology on which we can count on. So even if I have the money to put on a factory, the challenge will be in these spaces, especially that these are very technologically driven products. If I don't have that, it becomes a challenge for me, even despite the amount of capex that I have. So second is essentially everybody said across the value chain is R&D. Third, I believe, is the right partnerships, right? I think what people here also mentioned that, when you are looking at de-risking your supply chain, they went from China to Europe. Sir said from Lumax that, they also looked at different places where you don't have to fight every battle that comes along your way. So you sometimes have to pick and choose your right battles. So I think that's one space where you'll have to see that which right partner do we take on board, and not just go for exactly the cheapest option available on the market, despite the risk that it carries, right? So we have seen this even with the customers in our segment. What they have been asking is, what alternates can you provide? So even when we were making, so just give you an example, when we were coming into this chemical space for battery materials, I think we started investing somewhere around 12 years back. The first investment that we made was in-house R&D that we did in Germany. But then on the bigger scale, the first investment we did was in Japan. So we had a JV made in Japan with Toda Battery Materials. They were a very established player already in Japan, right? And people said that there is no point in, when you can have a technology with a stable partner, you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. So we made that first investment in Japan. Second one we did in China. And the third one when we built, quite surprisingly, if you would have had 2 JVs, right, you would want to do a third JV. We did third absolutely on our own in Germany. So the plant that we have in Germany is 100% BASF owned. In China, we have a 51-49% share. Japan, we have 70-30. What it gives them, to our customers, the confidence is that we have a partner who has German roots, economies of scale in Asia with China and Japan, and they also have back of the mind security. Then you can still go to Europe. Is it going to be expensive? Yes, it's going to be expensive. So I think these are the 2 or 3 points that you can look in the short term, that you have to select the right partner. In mid-term, of course, your R&D investments are not going to give you returns in the short term, but it's really for the mid and long term that you're looking at. So in mid to long term, that's what you do. You build up on R&Ds. And then in the long term, I think in terms of self-reliance, you need to keep on looking at the back value chain, because I would say in EVs, the value chain is very long. And a step back that you take, you multiply the investments in multiples, right? So just to give you an example, if somebody has to put up if you look at the lithium ion cell investment today in India, you essentially see two very active players, or I would say, sorry, three very active players in India. Collectively, they have invested somewhere in the tune of 11,000 crores, right? You don't see it in the market because you don't hear too much, but essentially a 5 gigawatt, 6 gigawatt lithium ion cell plant will cost you about 3,500 crores. It's not a small investment to anybody to put in.
Right.
And very interestingly, when people are putting up these gigafactories, in the time period that they have done it, the technologies have actually evolved. So this is very critical in this journey, that by the time you bring up something, your technologies also move. So you have to be very, as you said, you have to be very flexible, right? You cannot be sticking to what is going on and what you decided on. So short term, build the right partnerships, get the right partners on board. Mid-terms, put your R&D investments in, ensure that you have products that can, go into the market later. And in the longer term, I would say, look at the whole value chain. Pick and choose your battles which you can really fight with competitive advantage in India. If you can't do it, go to the government, find out the right partnership and secure yourself somewhere else. But it doesn't mean that you have to be across all the value chains for putting up something.
So there is no short-term magic bullet. It has got to be a long, hard road ahead.
I don't think so. I think if it would have been, we have very smart investors, people who can take these decisions very quickly. They would have done it already. So I think it's like the automotive, right? It's a grim that you have to go through piece by piece, but look at all the aspects.
Sure. Ashim, steps for self-reliance. In your assessment, you deal with the entire ecosystem. Where can India start? What is the low-hanging fruit?
So I think, during to what Rishabh also just mentioned, of course, one is securing the raw material through alliances, through partnerships and all of that. Second, as I said, building this enough of a skill, resource base here so that whatever you bring in, you can build on that. Third is leveraging where we've done well. So electronics, like we just heard, we've seen a lot of that come into the ICE vehicles. Leverage that also for EVs moving ahead. Then also software. I think, I'll take off from where Mr. Doriswamy also mentioned about, the increasing software content in vehicles. I would also say a lot of this is also being leveraged in terms of crunching the product development time. If you look at the success of the Chinese, it's in part also because of the way they've been launching vehicles. Following that fail fast strategy. You launch a lot of them, they fail, you launch another one, so on and so forth. And they are using a lot of AI, digital twins, all of that stuff, a lot of virtual testing in the product development cycle to crunch that down. We, for a very long period, have shown the world that you can make a prototype much cheaper in India than you can do it in the West. I think that paradigm has to change now with we using more and more of software and technologies to also crunch down that product development time. And that will also, see us in that right light. So that would be another element to look at. And then also, from the circularity standpoint, since we don't have these materials, I think we must make the right steps take the right steps in terms of recycling, whether it's the battery materials, as the rare earths, again, for some of which the technology is not there. So form that technology alliance, start doing it here. Also look at from an ESG standpoint, like you were mentioning, say something like battery passports, so that you know how that battery is traveled across its life cycle, second lives, and then also when you recycle that material and use it, even from an export competitiveness standpoint, especially say if you want to export to the EU, etc., I think all that will come in very handy. So that also needs to be another aspect that we must focus on. I think looking at all of these, in tandem will certainly help us out. Yeah, the government has put in place the policies, so there are catalysts out there in terms of demand and some also on the supply side. But I think some of these fundamental building blocks need to be put in place if we really want to become self-reliant.
Catalyst is needed on the R&D front.
R&D front, and also, leveraging some of our strengths like software here. So not just for what's getting into the vehicle, but also in terms of developing new vehicles.
Prashant, if I could get your views, the paths to self-reliance in your...
I would to some extent just maybe add to what Rishabh and Ashim mentioned. But just to emphasize one point, recycling is something which I think India can do, right? We have develop our own, shall I say, rare earth metals or whatever else will take time, no? And also now with the Chinese government putting pressure on processing technology also to leave the country. But recycling and making sure that some portion of our requirement is met by ourselves is something which definitely we can
Emphasis
do as
on
a country
recycling to cater
and
to
as
the
a
short-term
government.
needs.
That's right. But that will require us to work for the short term to solve a problem in the mid-term, right? I
Right.
don't think it is going to solve the problem immediately. The government can perhaps incentivize or enable, as a good word that I learned today, by adding some percentage of the incentives on the production side or design side, rather than look only on the demand stabilization or demand generation side.
Right.
India actually has decent amount of capability on power electronics because
Yeah.
of switchgear and everything else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, L&T,
Yeah.
who are started it, but now owned
Right.
by Schneider and so on and so forth. So India has capability on power electronics. If a Mercedes-Benz center in India using Indian engineers can do the MBUX, which is used by Mercedes globally,
Yeah.
there is no reason why the same thing cannot be done by an Indian company for an Indian model.
Right.
Mahindra, I think to some extent has already started that. Maybe the first effort is an assembly of technologies coming in from global players, some portion of it delivered from outside India.
Right.
I think there is no shame in starting that way.
Right.
What is important is that whether we have the rigor in the short term to transit to the mid-term. And we could actually start by even the two-wheeler segment, right?
Yeah.
In the sense, it's an easier segment for us to tackle, smaller battery sizes, complexities are lesser.
Right.
I think it's important first is to have, and not the nicest way to say this, I'm sorry if at the end of the day I bring this comment, but I think we have to have pride also as a nation.
True.
Just a pride as a market and our belief that as a market we will be attractive enough for everybody. And I completely echo what Vikas said. If every single analyst is asking him, how much is your order book EV based?
True.
And everybody wants the EPS movement in the next quarter. It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Right. True. True.
Companies will not invest for the midterm. So the government has to play a role. I do not know why, though we have the scheme called DLI, I have no idea why none of us, the press, those of us in the industry, even the government, we don't talk about how many people are actually getting that money.
Right. Right.
That's
Got it.
something which I think we need to focus on strongly. And recycling, definitely we should focus on.
Right, right. Karan, if I could bring you in your view, you've rapidly localized, and when you look at the future, and you're very good in telematics as well, what, according to you, paths to self-reliance?
Yeah, so just adding another part of, or another facet of reality that we will be facing when we move from short term to medium and long term and so on, right? Like our colleague here said, there is, we are going to have to invest in R&D and indigenize some things, not from a point of view of cost effectiveness, but from a point of view of resilience and having and owning the indigenized IP. But when we have to, when those products come into the market, the OEM's support will be required because they will actually not be cost effective, right, as compared to the Chinese counterparts. And there will be another strain on the business model. It's a tricky balance, and it will keep going back and forth, but that is the only path or strategy to a resilient supply chain, and that is something we all, as an industry, will face.
Right, right, right. Mr. Marwa, your two bits on how can we move on to this path?
Well, frankly, pardon me for saying so, but I think today each one is for himself in this race, and there was a reference to China 2001 and everything. I think we are in the same environment, the same smog in Delhi at least. When the smog clears out and we are able to see more clearly, what worked well for China and Taiwan was a huge central nodal government push. We do not have a national EV council. If it is there, maybe it exists on a paper somewhere, at least as tier 1s, we are not part of it. Chasing my precious metal crisis again, I stumbled upon an entity called Indian Rare Earth Limited. I didn't even know it existed. And then I came to know it's there since 1950. Now the minerals and the metal corporations are not talking to the people who are talking about EV. They are not talking about to Niti Aayog. They are not talking to the industry stakeholders. For us, a huge challenge that is there is that when I go around looking for semiconductors today, I run into a challenge of finding the testing, validation, and the parameter performance standards for that. Who is going to certify it? Today, it's my JV partners or my OEMs who are certifying it.
Right.
So at least I think at a SIAM and an ACMA level where we are of course there and we work very closely together, we will need to come more on board with the policy makers who are showing the right intent. But then if there are conditions being put like 50% gross domestic value addition and everything when it is not going to fly, that is something that will not happen.
True.
Again, I reinforce very strongly that there is enough space for everybody out there. Today, we are at a 5 million passenger vehicle market. I'm not even counting the 200,000 passenger cars that we do. And I'm also not counting the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler story because trust me, in this entire EV narrative, it gets masked in those two-wheeler and three-wheeler numbers.
Yes.
The 100,000 numbers nobody registers ki car jo hai wo 100,000 hi hai aaj ki date mein, which may become 300,000 very soon. I am talking about this 500,000 passenger car going to 700,000, 7 million or 8 million in 2030. In this, there are more than enough playing fields for everybody with electronification being the key driver for it, premiumization being the key driver for it. A category that we are very heavily focusing on, and my friends here are also, a category that has emerged in recent years is mechatronics.
Yeah.
The electronification, integration of the mechanical components, and that is something India is great at. Forget the chips, forget the fab world, come back to fabless. Think about designing those chips, integrating them well, and then moving forward. That is something that India can do brilliantly. I'm sorry, we don't have billions of dollars. Neither do the Indian GCCs have.
Right.
They can probably design for the world, but ask them about designing for India, then where are those volumes?
Yeah.
So let this story and this narrative play out. Let the government and the ecosystem get its clarity. For now, I think everybody is doing well.
I think people are operating in silos, and what you are saying is that there is something serious like a national EV policy that is needed, if at all, like you said, if it is there in place, and a cohesive approach towards addressing this challenge rather than each company working for itself. Pedro, if I could bring you in from a global approach, when your Indian entity faces the crisis of supply chain, or your customers face that challenge, how do you ensure that each individual region can be self-sufficient?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. The point that you touched is a very important one. I mean, policies and policy mandates are important, especially when we deal with topics such as circularity and recycling, where you can't simply leave it all on the shoulders of the single company and the short to mid-term return of investments. You need something, I mean, recycling is an excellent thing, but it must be done in a proper way, and it must be built on a system-wide approach. This means, for example, and I'm speaking about plastics in automotive, but I think this can easily be extended to other products and sectors. This means that you need to design for now, for making the cars of 10 years from now recyclable in an affordable and sustainable way, and sustainable also from the economic point of view.
Right.
This means you have to think the parts so that they can be easily dismantled, easily recovered, so that someone can properly recycle them and give them a second life and re-emit them in the value chain. In a proper way. And this indeed needs some sort of system, some sort of regulation, come it from the government, come it from OEMs, from consortium, but there must be somehow a guidance in that direction, because otherwise the risk is to waste resources looking here and there, but getting nothing done.
Right, so the long-term policy is needed and a clear path, because the recycling and the net zero path will eventually come and we'll have to deal with it. So it's a very pertinent point. Mr. Chawla, if I could come to you, your two bits on the paths to self-reliance. You've started on a good note, you've acquired, you've grown rapidly, recognized as well. In your assessment, you know, where can the electrification journey from self-reliance perspective?
Well, I think we are dependent to get some components since we want to design better, we want to create the capability that I think the panelists have mentioned. The other thing is that right now we import. We need to innovate more. We need to bring in all the things here to do that. I think we need to have some global ambition. We spoke about pride, but two-wheeler market was a good example I think you gave. So somewhere we also need the policy support. Maybe there is a voice to be heard through CM, and maybe, you know, because we heard a lot of OEMs today talking about what they're doing. So I think the action is here, but we need to be, I think, more ambitious and look at what India can play, because, you know, the other countries do have certain, you know, there are barriers, but India is well poised, I think. And we should look at having some ambition there.
So think big, innovate, and look at global markets rather than just look at India and just self-reliance. So thank you very much. On that note, I guess the path to sustainability or self-reliance is a long one. It's going to be a path strewn with a lot of speed breakers along the way, but we got to fix the roots, and that's the right path for self-reliance, I guess. Thank you very much for listening in. Thank you very much for participating.